So here it is. This is what you're going to say tonight. What is school-wide positive behavior support? School-wide positive behavior support is a systems approach. It's not just teaching social skills. It's not doing that. Teaching social skills is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's necessary but insufficient. School-wide positive behavior support is a systems approach for establishing a social culture. And adding to that, the higher intensity behavior supports for those kids who need it. Remember, never again do something with only one level of intensity. Multiple levels of intensity. But the goal is to create an environment in which kids are both socially and academically successful. If the kids are not academically successful, we haven't done what we're meant to do. Here's what the science tells us. Here's what the science tells us when you talk about what are the evidence-based practice. Item number 1, invest in prevention first. This is the most important thing I want you to really take away. I want you to invest in having the kids be successful before they have a chance to screw up. The old way of doing behavior support, when I was a teacher, we would start the school year about November, we'd identify the kids who had problems, we'd start doing the assessments, then the holidays would miraculously show up, and we'd stumble along until January, then we'd gear back up. By February, we'd actually have a plan developed. We'd start implementing the plan. It wouldn't quite work. March, we'd finally get the plan going. April and May, we'd be doing pretty well. And then in the end of May or June, we'd implement our major intervention, which was hope they'd get better over the summer. Okay, here you go. I mean, one of the things I do, I train administrators in Oregon. Nobody gets a principal's certification at the University of Oregon, doesn't take a course from me on behavior and classroom management. One of the things we do is I show people a budget. Here's a budget for a school. Show me in the budget the values of the school. You want to tell me where your values lie? It's not in the verbal behavior of your administrator. The values are defined by the way you spend your money and the way you allocate your resources. That's where your values lie. If you're committed to kids who are actually having difficulty, show me in the budget where you've got resources built in to respond and respond quickly to kids who have difficulty. You ready? You know right now, here it is, it's May. You know right now 75% of the heavy hitters next fall. Okay? Come on, you do. And you're going to have some people who are going to move around, but generally you know who the players are. I want 75% of your high-intensity interventions in place by Halloween. 75% of your high-intensity interventions in place by Halloween. Gear up. Use your school psychologists, social workers, behavior intervention case managers, BICMs. If you don't know what a BICM is, talk to the people who stand around the edges. All right? Use those resources, but get that stuff in place. Gear up. Second, part of what I want is I want every single child, by the end of the second week of school, every single kid in all of your schools needs to be able to know what are the behavioral expectations. Now, you're not going to be able to do that this coming year because it's going to take you longer to build foundation. But by the fall of 2011, when you start school, every single kid by the end of the second week knows what the behavioral expectations are. They know what it means to be behaviorally successful in the school. They know what it means to be a member of this learning community. So engage in prevention, invest. And I got to tell you, here's a big deal. We think of engaging and investing in prevention as hoping. This is actually investment. I actually want you to spend some time and money. That means staff time. That means scheduling. That means actually teaching the kids. Not a lot, but you've got to invest. So invest in prevention first. Now remember the thing I said before. What's the smallest change that produces the biggest effect? Here it is. The smallest thing you can do that will change the social culture of your school is to define 3 to 5 positively stated behavioral expectations. Actively teach those. Acknowledge them on a regular basis. Collect the data to document if you're doing it, and establish a set of consequences that are clear, consistent, and a continuum that's used consistently throughout the school. If you do those things, define and teach the social expectations. So one of the things you're going to be, you're actually going to be asked to do this right after we come back. I'm going to ask you I want you to say, if you were to define the core values of your school, what would they be? The core social values that everybody could tap into, regardless of culture, regardless of background. What are the core things to be a member? Do we have a way in which people get acknowledged for doing things on a regular basis? I love this because one of the things we do is we actually interview the kids. We say, was this a good thing to do? Did this work, right? Are you clear about what the expectations are? Should we do this again next year, right? Should we do this with other people? And one of the things that I love, we've taught the behavioral expectations. We've only done it like 4th grade and up, and the 4th and 5th, 6th graders, they all say, yeah, this is a good thing. Anything you do is fine. We love you. The 7th and 8th graders, the more consistent message is, as a mature adult, I personally did not need this. But I think it is really an excellent thing to do with the wretched 6th graders who are only marginally human, right? I mean, it's like, I love, in middle school, social skills are a lot like driving. 87% of people think they're better than average drivers. The same is true in middle school of social competence, right? So in part, the thing that I want you to think about is, the thing I love is we got them thinking about other kids, not just about themselves. What they got was the idea that we're building something for others. Arrange clear and consistent consequences. So the consequences need to be fair, they need a continuum, but here's the big deal. They need to be predictable and consistent. If the person in room 9 implements things completely different than the person in room 2, the kids get confused. Our job is to create an environment that is clear, consistent, positive, and safe. So part of what I want you to be thinking about, to what extent can you identify, right? This is this test. To what extent can you identify the rule that everybody in the school would use for when you send a kid to the office versus when you handle something in class? If you were at a faculty meeting to have everybody write that down, and then you were to read them, how consistent would they be, right? Within a year, I want it to be consistent. If the adults are consistent, the kids will be clear. That doesn't mean you take away the professional discretion of an administrator or a teacher. There's always going to be a level of professional discretion where you've got to make the judgment. But the thing is, our ability to build clarity is going to be directly related to their ability. Now, when we talk to the kids and we say, does this work? The thing that makes it work is if we have consequences for doing it wrong and acknowledgments for doing it right. If you want kids to change, teach what you want, acknowledge what you want, and build consequences for doing it the wrong way. If you don't do all 3 of those parts, they think that all you're doing is trying to meet the school improvement plan goal, right? You fill out the yellow form. Yes, we did the teaching, right? Everybody comes in, okay, this year, everyone will be respectful. You may leave. That'll get you 0. Okay? Teaching is necessary, but you'll only really get change in kid behavior if you attach it to consequences for doing it the wrong way and consequences for doing it the right way. Part of it, that's when they believe us. The other piece, kids who come from very well socialized backgrounds don't need all of this, but you're going to have 20 to 30 to 40% of your kids who don't come from environments that have that clarity. If you really want to make the circle wider, you increase the precision with which you are able to deliver the social culture. The clarity. That makes that social culture more accessible to a wider range of kids. Collect and use data, a continuum for intensive interventions. I'll show you a little bit more about that later on. And implementation so that you put the systems in place that will allow things to sustain. So when you put PBIS in place, it's going to last for how long? Decade. All right. Now, last little bit. You keeping track? Okay. I want you to come. This whole notion of social culture, remember, this is the part I get to talk, and then you got to work after this. Social culture. I mean, it's a nice word, right? When have you actually established a social culture? You will have established a social culture when you do three things. I mean, I want you to really think about the extent to which kids think about themselves as being toros or bulls or panthers or whatever, right? I want you to think about whether they actually identify as being members of the learning community you're creating. Here's what we've learned. One, build a common language. That doesn't mean everybody speaks English. It means everybody can say the words. So when you walk up and you say, what are the behavioral expectations? Somebody can say, be respectful, be responsible, be safe. Try hard, consider others, whatever it is. They know the words. The words are concepts. You're going to teach those concepts. Second is they've got a common vision, which means they can translate those words into real behaviors. I mean, come on, you walk up to a second grader, you say, what are the expectations here, right? And she says, be responsible. Get you nothing unless she can tell you what being responsible means on the playground, being responsible means in the hallway, being responsible means, show me what it looks like, right? And here's the biggest one. So common language, common vision, and the third is common experience. Common experience means you don't do this in isolation. You don't do it one kid at a time. You do it together. I want everybody to know that everybody else knows, right? I want you to have it something where all the kids know that everybody knows what the expectations are. Here's the bottom line. The bottom line is you will have established a social culture not when students do what adults have told them, but when students expect appropriate behavior from each other. The key thing, I want you to create an environment where the majority of kids expect appropriate behavior from each other. How do you do that? You don't do that by just telling one at a time, here's what it is. You don't do it like teaching math. You do it by actually teaching everybody together so that everybody knows what the expectations are. When you do that, it actually changes the way that kids interact with each other. I want them to have the words. I want them to have that experience. Good example, elementary school. One of the behavioral expectations was be safe. Be safe on the playground meant you go down the slide, not up. I mean, that was one of the examples. Second grade boy was starting to go up the slide. Two fifth graders walked by. One of them looked and said, be safe, walked on. Second grader got off the slide. He got off the slide because he knew that they knew that he knew. The fifth grader used that word because he knew that second grader knew what the word meant. See the difference? All right, another example. This is actually an example that I use all the time. This is related to a middle school. So one of the middle schools that we worked with had 5 behavioral expectations. Be respectful, be responsible, hands and feet to self, be there, be ready, follow instructions, right? And hands and feet to self is always one of those things in middle school. It means not only that you don't hit, kick, spit, bite, throw, it also means you don't walk down the hallway wrapped around each other, right? So, I mean, one of the things, can I borrow your hand? So we do hands and feet to self, all right? You may hold hands. Don't hold anything else. All right? So we did the behavioral expectations. One of those great things, I actually sent a bevy of graduate students into this school about 2 weeks after they had done it. And we interviewed the middle school students. You know, do you know what the expectations are, right? What does it mean right here, all that sort of stuff. 92% of the students in this middle school could tell us the behavioral expectations. 92%. 92% of middle school students don't know what day it is. Okay? No, I mean, seriously, I want you to actually teach. I want you to teach these concepts. I want you to teach being respectful and responsible the same way in elementary school you teach the preposition on, right? You got to teach what is on, and you got to teach what is not on, right? I want you to teach it the same way in middle school that you'd teach the concept democracy. Give them the word, show them what it is, show them what it is not. I want you to teach in high school. You're going to teach differential equations, right? What are differential equations? What is the definition? You know, differential, no. All right, so anyway, the point is teach these concepts the same way you teach academic concepts. Build that sense of community and context. So, this middle school, remember? Hands and feet to self, be there, be ready, follow instructions, be respectful, be responsible. This high school or middle school vice principal was in the hallway, and this young lady was walking down the hall. So she was coming down the hall, and this young man was looking and watching her walk down the hall, and his eyes were alit, and it was clear he was thinking, I would like to make a social bid to this young woman, or something equivalent, right? And so he's watching her, and as she approaches, he gets out in front of her and he hits her on the shoulders. And I don't know where that comes from, but she stops and she looks at him and she says, hands and feet to yourself, and walked on. Okay, two things. One, that's a social skill training trial that we could never deliver, right? She just taught something that we couldn't do. Two, she used the words because she knew that he knew. Because we had taught her the behavioral expectations, she had power. I want you to build a social culture in which the kids are empowered to build something that actually works. All right? When you do that, I want you to do it in a way, remember, never do something with a single level of intensity. Start with the prevention, but build the other pieces for everybody. Last piece, and then we got to go. Right? We're going to take a break. Remember the triangle? Okay, here's the message. I want you to take away two themes from the triangle. Two messages. Message number one, invest in prevention first. The triangle always starts with one triangle, all kids, in the green part. The triangle starts with everybody. One kid, or one map for everyone. So prevention for all. The first big message from the triangle is the smallest change you can do to produce the biggest effect is to invest in prevention. Second message from the triangle. Don't be naive. That'll only work about 80% of the time. Okay? But if you get 80% of the kids who have bought in, they know what the expectations are, and they are expecting that of all the other kids, you will have created a context that's going to be a much easier context for you as adults. Don't control, empower. Second big message, always include multiple levels of intensity. So when you look at the extent to which you've got not just a strategy for establishing prevention, but if somebody has a little bit, a need for a little bit more support, what happens? If somebody has a need for a lot of support, what happens? I want you to have something else other than sending them to Nevada, right?